Around a decade ago, a researcher named Hilton Jobyasu entered into the continuum of scientists studying an idea called extended cognition. Through observing common biological anomalies in the animal kingdom, scientists like Jobyasu had started to recognize a pattern indicating that thinking was not necessarily limited to the brain. By now, it's pretty common knowledge that having a gut feeling is no mere colloquialism. In fact, humans have millions of neurons, or thinking cells, located in the belly. When I consider this, it makes sense to me. As a human animal, I sort of know what gut cognition feels like. However, for me, it's a lot more uncomfortable to try to accept the presence of extended cognition as it's observed in other species. So when I read descriptions of how crickets have ears in their knees, which receive and respond to sound independent of the insect's brain, I find it equal parts fascinating and disgusting. Similarly, our friend the octopus demonstrates extended cognition with his tentacle arms. It turns out that the mental math required to move an appendage like that with any accuracy is beyond even the largest of brains, and the octopus relies on the arm's local signals to virtually control itself. It's pretty creepy. By comparison, the most groundbreaking and most controversial example being discussed today feels pretty tame. I'm talking about the humble spiderweb. Arachnophobes, you may wish to take a quick break. I'll give you a wave when it's safe to come back. So researchers seem fascinated by the spiderweb. It's been studied dozens of different ways within the past 50 years alone. Jobyasu's work, however, has sent biology in a whole new direction in terms of conceptualizing this everyday architectural miracle. Essentially, what's being suggested is that a spider actually uses its web to think. There's lots of info to read up on if you find this interesting, but I'll give you the bare bones basic sketch. Number 1, a bug lands in the web, which tightens a thread and calls the spider's attention. This is a form of gaining information. Number 2, a spider is hungry. It tightens threads where it wants to pay attention. This is a form of seeking information. Number 3, one part of the web is catching lots of meals. This spider adjusts the construction of that part of the web to be more reactive. This is a form of storing memory. In the view of Jobyasu and his cohort, these 3 things make a spider's web functionally indistinguishable from its nervous system. This instance of extended cognition helps explain how something with such a small physical brain can complete such complicated tasks. Okay, the arachnophobes in the congregation can safely uncover their ears now. Storing memories outside the brain is an adaptation that is almost fundamentally human. What is a shopping list? What is a photo album? Albert Einstein reputedly instructed listeners never to memorize something they could just as easily look up in a book. Just like in the homes of our 8-legged friends, however, this storage of memories takes on a shape of its own. Perhaps we create a private library of science fiction novels or record a terabyte of family home videos. In such ways, it becomes literally true that what we pay attention to grows. We change our functional environment, and in turn, our environment changes us. And through this cycle, certain things become an extension of a person's experience of the self. African-American theologian and philosopher Anthony Pinn reflects on one's experience of the self through a lens that he calls complex subjectivity. Complex subjectivity is, in a sense, the antidote to dehumanization, particularly for Black Americans, among other marginalized groups. At its simplest, this term means belonging. More specifically, it suggests that we experience ourselves in sacred wholeness when we experience mutual recognition with other people. I see you in the fullness of your humanity, and you see me, and we affirm that we are whole. People seek out community, truly need community, because without it, their sense of humanity is incomplete. I think of this mutual affirmation as one of the sacred functions of that notorious interconnected web of which we are a part. And all of this makes me think back to when I was a child. Around age 13 or 14, after leaving the tradition of my upbringing, I started to freely conceptualize God for myself. After deciding many things that God was not, I was ready to dream up what it might be. First, I decided that I needed a new name. God already had an intense associated image for me, so I needed to try a different word. Divinity felt both accurate and full of possibility, so I called it Divinity with a capital D for many years. Next, I determined that if the divine was made of anything, it had to be energy. If there's one thing that's present and pervasive in some form in every corner of the universe, it's energy. Both physics and metaphysics seemed to fit with this explanation, so I kept it. A name and a substance determined, I felt called to dream up a shape. And so, I kid you not, with no prior knowledge of Unitarian Universalist beliefs, I started conceptualizing the divine as a universe-sized, interconnected web. My teenage self also professed that, as a living part of this network, each of our choices made divinity, and therefore everything in existence, infinitesimally more good or bad in nature, but that's a philosophical tangle for another Sunday. So it wasn't until adulthood that I learned that this network of energy model is actually a pretty common theological belief, and versions of it are described in multiple common religious belief systems. Knowing what we know about relational existence, however, is it really any surprise that humans gravitate to that interpretation? Let me give you an example of a time that I felt that connection in action. Anyone who has worked in customer service might relate to this memory. I was working the early morning shift in a coffee shop in a busy metropolitan area. More mornings than not, within the first hour of my shift, I would have a sense of the public mood of the day. It didn't really correspond to the weather or the day of the week or any current events going on, and oftentimes myself and my coworkers would be the first real human contact of the day that any of these customers were encountering. And yet somehow, without fail, one day they'd all come in grouchy, and the next they'd all look like they were freshly in love. And over time, I stopped feeling like I was even talking with individual people, and I started feeling like I was having sort of micro conversations with the local zeitgeist. Maybe it was the pre-dawn hour, or all of the free espresso, or maybe it was a glimpse at some beyond the body nervous system. I don't expect I'll ever know for sure, but it does influence how I think about humans. Not really as individuals, but as unique facets of a much greater whole. One rather obvious way in which many of us collect consciousness on a daily basis is by using the internet. In fact, Fritz Vollrath, one of our spider scientists, outright refers to the spider web as a sort of extra biological computer. I'll fully, if not proudly, admit that I'm part of a generation which has grown up with online technology so intimately that if I don't have my smartphone with me, I sometimes feel like I'm missing half my brain. It wouldn't even be much of a stretch to say that people like me think using our media devices. By Japyasu's definition, cognition is the act of acquiring, manipulating, and storing information, all of which I do on the internet daily. The main point of contention with this definition of thought, however, is that it does not include the element of meaning making. Is the internet the image of God? That mere question is equal parts depressing and preposterous. But is the internet a tool for meaning making? I'd prefer to leave that up to interpretation. But to reflect on the lessons of the past 4 months, though, I'd have to say that I've personally experienced moments of profound connection, genuine wonder, and marvelous innovation. If the World Wide Web has become our collective tool for extended cognition, we could do worse. The internet delivered all the articles and conversations which inspired and informed this sermon. It allowed me to filter that data through hours of streaming music and then store it in the cloud and offer it to each of your own minds this morning. Even while committing to keep each other safe by keeping our distance, we still have the chance to experience the communion of complex subjectivity. I see you, you see me. Together we affirm that we are whole. How miraculous! And I have learned how utterly natural of us. This week, I challenge you to notice and appreciate those times when your self-perception expands beyond the brain in your skull and the face in your mirror. From the neurons in the gut to an email sent from halfway around the world, to be human is to be given the gift of boundless forms of extended cognition. When I think of each of you today, I feel an expansive gratitude to know that we are together in this wholeness which is beyond oneness. May we all come to recognize the deep value in each unique facet of that human wholeness and never give up on making this vast network a just place where each being is received with reverence. Amen.
We invite you to sing our closing song out of the Great Book number 134, Our World is One World. The words will be on your screen. Our world is one world. What touches one affects us all. The seas that wash us round about, the clouds that cover us, the rains that fall. Our world is one world. The thoughts we think affect us all. The way we build our attitudes with love or hate, we make a bridge or wall. Our world is one world. Its ways of wealth affect us all. The way we spend, the way we share, who are the rich or poor, who stand or fall. Our world world is one world, just like a ship that bears us all, where fear and greed make many holds, but where our hearts can hear a different call.
We extinguish our chalice today with these words by John O'Donohue. May the nourishment of the earth be yours. May the clarity of light be yours. May the fluency of the ocean be yours. May the protection of the ancestors be yours. And so may a slow wind work these words of love around you, an invisible cloak to mind your life. Go in peace.